Naturally, when we watch movies, our initial appraisal is solely focused on whether we enjoyed it or not. Did we get what we personally wanted out of it, whatever that may be? But a director's job is to orchestrate the tone of the world in which the story is told, as any script can be realized in an endless number of ways. For instance, do they want it to feel cold or warm, funny or haunting? And what themes can the film express by putting our attention in different places? As what they choose to focus on, to show or not show, is really what defines the feeling of the film. A simple directing decision like, are we focusing on what's happening, or the character's emotional reactions to what's happening, can change everything. One might be more exciting, where the other is more emotionally intimate. Then there's the question of, what will the movie sound like? Will the music guide the emotional beats of the story, or will there be barely any music at all, to capture a more realistic fly-on-the-wall experience? But getting a cast and crew together is an expensive endeavour. Most of your favourite movies cost millions, if not tens or hundreds of millions, to produce. But unlike a lot of other industries, in order to even be hired, filmmakers have to demonstrate their talent by working on small, low-budget projects, where they either work for barely any money, no money at all, or self-fund the production themselves. These are passion projects, where the filmmakers have to sacrifice a lot just to hone their craft and indulge in their passion for storytelling, in the hopes that one day they'll be working on the big productions that attract audiences from around the world. But in an industry largely focused on what's next, sometimes it's better to examine what came before. How did some of your favourite directors get to where they are today, when, for the most part, they had no money behind them? Were their projects always amazing, or were there just glimpses of their talent that could then be fully realised with a larger budget? So let's take a closer look at some of the most popular film directors' first films. As much as every filmmaker wishes they could just make whatever they want from the get-go, when you're operating on a tiny budget, you're constrained from every angle, and need to find creative ways of still telling a story. For instance, Stanley Kubrick's first two short films, Flying Padre and Day of the Fight, were each made for just $3,900 when he was 23 years old. They're simple day-in-the-life documentary-style pieces, outlining the life of a priest who flies an airplane and the rituals a boxer goes throughout the day before he steps into the ring. But to cut costs, there's no dialogue, instead allowing a narrator to simply guide all the action.
His destination is Tucumcari, where an ambulance is waiting at the airport to rush the child to a hospital.
Time is a strange thing. When you have a little of it and you want it to last, it scatters away in all directions.
Now from this, would you be able to tell Kubrick's signature style? Not necessarily. Although for a first-time filmmaker operating on a tiny budget, Kubrick still finds ways to keep the action flowing, capturing the action of an airplane taking off from multiple angles, and even bringing the audience up to the sky for a novel experience in 1951. Martin Scorsese took a similar approach when he made his comedy short What's a Nice Girl Like You Doing in a Place Like This while studying in university. It tells the story of a struggling writer who becomes obsessed with a painting on the wall, but then finds a girl who really understands him and gets married. Despite the comedic tone, there are definite comparisons to be drawn to Taxi Driver already, as the main character hangs around his house, isolated and alone, growing obsessed. But similar to Kubrick, there's minimal dialogue. It's mostly just a narrator guiding the action to cut costs and utilizing jump cuts and even still images to keep the narration visually compelling. A style that would then clearly influence his later work, like Goodfellas.
Nothing was too good for us. We even had our honeymoon at the New York World's Fair.
To where I was even proud that I had the kind of husband who was willing to go out and risk his neck just to get us the little extras.
So even though he was just 21 years old, if it was made today, you'd say his work appears to be pleasantly influenced by Martin Scorsese, which from such an early age definitively indicates a personal style. Edgar Wright's first feature film, A Fistful of Fingers, was a comedic take on spaghetti westerns. While the minuscule $15,000 budget definitely shows, for such a young filmmaker, there were already symptoms of his blossoming visual style of fast comedic cuts timed with sound effects. These are the little moments that demonstrate that a filmmaker has a firm grasp of the medium, and even if they're few and far between, having any strong moments on a shoestring budget is an impressive feat that makes you a viable candidate for larger projects. While clearly influenced by the likes of Zucker, Abrams, and Zucker, this modest project set the stage for him satirizing some of cinema's most cherished genres as his career took off. And then there's M. Night Shyamalan, who instantly started with the feature film Praying with Anger that had a surprisingly large budget of $750,000. It was written, produced, directed, and starring himself. While the high budget is unusual, this is quite a common approach by filmmakers in their earliest stages, trying to create a launchpad for themselves in whatever way they can, whether it's in front of or behind the camera.
What is going on?
And M. Night would continue to insert himself and even his family members into his movies whenever possible. However, the film about an American returning to his home country of India to find himself was a bit paint by numbers, and didn't have his signature twist that would later become his calling card. Whereas with other directors, their action-oriented style is clear right from the beginning. For example, George Lucas wrote and directed Electronic Labyrinth while he attended USC. The short film takes place in a nightmarish dystopian world in which a character is trying to flee his community while being tracked by computers. Here, Lucas utilizes a white, black, and blue color palette, which visually sets the table for his ambitions with Star Wars. And as the character tries to escape, we hear an endless amount of radio communications about his whereabouts and the beeping and buzzing sounds of computers. All of which is present in his groundbreaking feature, A New Hope.
Hang on back there! Red 6, can you see Red 5? There's a heavy fire zone on this side. Red 5, where are you?
Then, after being directly inspired by Lucas's Star Wars, James Cameron decided it was time to try his hand at making his own sci-fi short, Xenogenesis, having received $20,000 in funding from a local dentist. Already we're getting Terminator vibes right from the opening credits. And while you can laugh and think, well, this isn't exactly a Hollywood-level sci-fi, yeah, no, of course it isn't. This is a micro-budget short film, largely shot in Cameron's own living room. So while his ambitions may have outweighed his capability, he still captures impressive action sequences, like one character falling and hanging over a ledge, and having a strong female lead battling the robot by controlling a suit of machinery. So even from such a humble project, all the signs were there that one day he had it in him to create one of cinema's most iconic showdowns.
Get away from her, you bitch!
That's what I find so interesting about looking backwards instead of forwards sometimes. There are often these little flashes, these certain creative instincts within directors that tend to crop up time and time again. With Steven Spielberg, even as a teenager, his short film Escape to Nowhere demonstrated an understanding of capturing the action of war, which he would later fulfill to its full potential in Saving Private Ryan. But in his first feature film Duel, when he had a budget of $450,000, now we start to see Spielberg's fleshed out storytelling instincts. Similar to Jaws, he uses a lot of point of view angles, except instead of a shark, it's a car being hunted down by a truck. And the films both end similarly, with the main character putting themselves in harm's way to destroy the monster. There are also comparisons to be drawn in the types of tension and action that Spielberg likes to create. For instance, in Duel, when he pushes his protagonist into danger, with the villainous truck pressing him into a moving train, he puts a lot of focus on the car wheels trying to reverse as they're physically pushed forward. This conflictive movement gives the audience a sense of struggle as the threat level increases, something he later repeats in The Lost World, as two T-Rexes try to push our truck full of heroes over a cliff, and Eddie has to try to reverse them out of trouble. Christopher Nolan started strong with his first feature film Following, made for a tiny $6,000 when he was 28. And despite having all the drawbacks of a micro-budget film, like shaking tracking shots and shooting in black and white to save on lighting costs, he managed to make a genuinely compelling piece of work that has all the hallmarks of a Nolan cinematic experience. A confident character named Cobb, later to be recycled in Inception, who introduces the protagonist to an underworld of crime, and a final twist that changes everything, reframing all the little details we've seen so far. But despite the budget, we still see these flashes of brilliance, like in the moment during a burglary when the homeowners return and the characters need to escape. Here Nolan takes us from a relaxed civil discussion to a sudden change of pace, executed using high-tempo music and faster-moving camera and character action, which really showcases what someone of his talent could do later when there are no limitations. Because when it's done right, a director's early work should indicate the types of stories they want to tell. Just look at Robert Eggers. He's always been drawn to retelling old stories that are now in the public domain through his unique creative lens. His first short, Hansel and Gretel, thematically fed into his first feature, The Witch. And his second short, a remake of Edgar Allan Poe's The Telltale Heart, naturally led him to remaking classic stories like Nosferatu. Studios tend to brand and subsequently pigeonhole creatives based on their previous work, which can be both good and bad. Good because it makes you more likely to get work, but bad because it can be hard to break out of. But it was clear from Eggers' Telltale Heart that he could be trusted with a period piece that goes from the mundane day-to-day to moments of hysterical madness, a theme we see recurring in his filmography again and again. The same could be said for Ari Aster, whose first shorts, Herman's Cure-All Tonic, Beau, and Munchausen, all set the tone for his career in horror. As although they're far from his best work, he still demonstrated a wide range of ability in each film. Made for a tiny $1,000, Herman's Cure-All Tonic juxtaposed the peaceful storefront of the pharmacy with the grueling horror behind the scenes. Beau, which was allegedly shot in a single day, captured the tension of a man losing his mind, and combined it with the theme of home intrusion. And inspired by Up, Munchausen tells the story of a mother who starts poisoning her son so he doesn't leave the nest. But the film has no dialogue, instead using music to emotionally guide the audience from beat to beat. And given film is such a visual medium, there definitely seems to be a value in young directors learning how to know when you need your characters to speak, and when you're better off just letting the visuals do your talking for you. But the master of this has to be David Lynch, who received a $7,200 production grant from the American Film Institute in 1970 to make his first real short film, The Grandmother. Similar to his later work, the film plays out like a macabre dream, with striking surreal imagery and a largely black and white colour palette. The film of course makes some thematic sense, but no clear narrative sense, also electing to abandon any use of dialogue and replacing it with grunts and barks to capture the animalistic breeding ground that is humanity. But by the end of The Grandmother, due to its unsettling ambient sounds and disturbing visuals, you immediately understand what David Lynch is all about as a creative force, capturing the essence of dreams and nightmares on film. Then on the other side of the fence is Quentin Tarantino, whose first film, My Best Friend's Birthday, is filled to the brim with chitty-chatty dialogue. Similar to other examples we've seen before, due to the tiny $5,000 budget, he shot it in black and white, and cast himself in a leading role. While the final reel of the film was destroyed in an unfortunate fire, from the remaining pieces we can see edited together, we still get glimpses into his creative preferences, with some funny sequences, like introducing a character by contrasting how others describe him with how he physically behaves.
So you don't know Eddie? He is really strong and really mean. Kill something!
And scenes that oddly resemble some of his later films like Pulp Fiction or Kill Bill. And of course, pages and pages of back and forth dialogue, typically involving characters that have very noticeable quirks and ways they live their life.
Now, I'm sorry, I don't play requests. Because when I'm Jock, I play what I want to play when I want to play.
Quentin's character, Clarence Poole, the Elvis-loving disc jockey, appears to have directly inspired True Romance's Clarence Worley, where he even repurposed some of the same dialogue.
I always said, if ever I had to fuck a guy, had to because, my life depended on it, I'd fuck Elvis.
I always said, if I had to fuck a guy, had to, if my life depended on it, I'd fuck Elvis.
So while Tarantino's film is clearly amateur, it still functioned as a template for the types of movies he would later create.
Yeah, but I have a foot fetish, so it kind of evened itself out.
Which leads us into the final type of first film, the proof of concept. Sometimes filmmakers just have a story idea that they know they want to tell. So rather than making a short film that just demonstrates that they have some ability, they decide to film an excerpt or short sample of the real movie they hope to direct. For example, at the shocking age of just 17, Paul Thomas Anderson wrote and directed the mockumentary The Dirk Diggler Story, which would serve as a template for his second feature film Boogie Nights, capturing the rise and fall of an adult film star. While the original short is of course amateur, it still somehow captures the chaos of a film set, and outlines the basic story arc of the title character.
The fact is, you're nothing without me. I'm the man with me who makes all this happen. You're nothing but a word on a page. I'm the man whose name is on that marquee out there. Not you, me!
And would then be brought to life 10 years later, boasting an all-star cast with a $15 million budget. So even if the original film itself was flawed and poorly produced, there was always something in the idea of a movie about an adult film star, and that story was living inside its director, just waiting to get out. But Damien Chazelle had a different kind of experience with Whiplash, where with his second ever short film, he managed to shoot a proof of concept with the actor he wanted already assuming the iconic role of Terence Fletcher. Yet unlike other examples, Chazelle had the benefit of modern technology, so although they shot it on a modest budget, benefiting from natural light instead of shooting it in a dark lit basement, it still managed to look and feel closer to a real movie than other directors endured in the past, with some sequences still being captured shot for shot as the director intended for the full feature version, as when it works, it works. And our final example is Wes Anderson, who was lucky enough to already be friends with the Wilson brothers from college. So just in terms of raw potential, he couldn't have started with a better cast. As per usual, Bottle Rocket was shot in black and white, but when you compare it shot for shot to the feature they made 4 years later, it's clear that Anderson really knew how he wanted to tell this whimsical tale, with tracking shots and two shots allowing the future movie stars to showcase their natural charisma. And after screening their short at Sundance, they captured the attention of James L. Brooks, who wanted to finance a full-length version of the film, which would then give this director the opportunity to express his now iconic visual style. Becoming a great film director isn't easy. You have to simultaneously have this absolute certainty in your creative vision while still having the flexibility to change it at a moment's notice if the production demands. Yes, bigger budget features are undeniably where the best work gets achieved. But there is a certain charm about short films, a passion, drive and sacrifice to showcase what you can do without all the bells and whistles. These directors didn't wait for an opportunity to fall on their lap. They took a chance on themselves and would rather make something than nothing. So if you're interested to learn more, I implore you to watch some of your favorite filmmakers' early work, as a lot of them can be found right here on YouTube. Sure, they may not have the best actors or incredible production value, but they can show you something about the director's purest creative instincts in ways that may otherwise go unnoticed. As it's easy to just admire where these famous filmmakers ended up. But sometimes there's no better education than seeing where they started off. So if you made it this far, firstly, thank you for watching, but if you could now click like, subscribe, and the notification bell, as otherwise that pesky algorithm will continue to suppress my videos from your feed.